What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. Today, we're joined by none other than Brad Graham, mastermind of the TheSFNiners social media pages. Brad, how are you feeling today? We're very excited to have you on, first of all.
Oh, I'm feeling great. Obviously, we've seen Trey Lance, we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo, we've seen what this offense is starting to look like through camp and in preseason. So as a fan of the 49ers, it's really hard not to be excited around this time.
Agreed. And I'm also joined by my co-host here, and Wrights.
Hello.
And you guys know me, Stragosaurus, Steph, whatever you want to call me. So we got a little bit of 49er news to go over today. Angie,
Just
you want
a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So they signed a lot of players since we last spoke with our listeners. Michael Kendricks, Fresno native. So welcome to Cali again. Donald Payne, Clinton Dix. That excited me because I've always wanted an excuse to get a Clinton Dix jersey. So hopefully that works out. They signed Eddie Vanderdoes, but we'll get to the bad news later. Shalik Calhoun and Alexander Myers. Some bad news. Safety Tony Jefferson was placed on the IR with a groin/hamstring injury. That was, if you followed his career, that's heartbreaking news to hear. And then the 49ers released Davin Bellamy, Kevin White, Mark Fields, Isaiah Williams, Ken Webster, James Burgess Jr., Donald Payne, and Eddie Vanderdoes. He did not have a very long tenure with the 49ers there.
Yeah, so they're now at 87 players, I think, and they got to cut down to 85 by tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific. So it'll be interesting to see who they cut in the meantime. Some other injury news that we got in the last few days. Aaron Banks is going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks with a shoulder injury. We'll talk more about Banks in a bit, but that's a bummer definitely to hear. Another rookie. Actually, all of the injury news I'm about to go over are all the rookies. Not all the rookies, but they're all rookies. So Aaron
not
Banks.
all the rookies. Oh my God.
Not all of them. Don't worry. But aside from Banks, Austin Watkins Jr. also suffered a broken foot. So he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. Like that one's a big bummer. Yeah. Also, Elijah Mitchell, as some of you probably heard, he's due to miss a couple weeks with abductor strain. So also
that's a rough injury, and it's good to hear that it's just a strain, because if you tear that muscle, I mean, you're using it all the time. So.
Right.
And while we are talking about injury news, we're actually getting live tweets from practice right now from some of the beat reporters. From Nick Wagner of ESPN, he just tweeted that left tackle Trent Williams departed early with a bit of a limp on his right leg. So we finally got Trent back in there, but he exited almost as soon as he entered. So it doesn't appear to be crazy.
Right.
Like
he's walking off on his own. Yeah.
But again, with those minor nicks can stick with you for a long time, especially as a player on the offensive line.
Man, and I was going to talk about Trent Williams a lot today and how excited I am that he's on our offensive line. So hoping that is not a serious injury. But this is what happens when you have Brad on your show. He just breaks news as you're recording.
Yeah, he was ready. I love that.
Yeah. So speaking of Trent Williams and how he didn't play on Saturday, I guess we can get into the offensive line stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do it.
Well, a lot of the starters did not play, which is expected in the first preseason game. Another thing that was expected was that the second unit was probably not going to be very good, as we've been hearing from all the reports coming out of training camp. Again, we could talk about Aaron Banks. Some of the reports out of training camp from him haven't been great. So, what have you seen, Brad? Is there reason for concern? Should we pump the brakes on any expectations?
I think we should pump the brakes on expectations, and I had to do that for myself personally. As someone who's scouted Aaron Banks pretty heavily, obviously once the 49ers drafted him and dug into the tape, I got really excited really early because the guy never lost in college. You saw the size, you saw his ability to move, pass block, run block, do it all. So it felt like he was going to be a good fit and have somewhat of a seamless transition from college to the NFL. But when I showed up at training camp, they weren't in pads to start off, but you could see that Aaron Banks was a little bit over his skis in the sense that the game was just coming at him really fast, and you could tell when offensive linemen are a little bit they're just not ready for it. They're not settled in. And so as we watched Aaron Banks throughout training camp, you saw that. You saw him start to settle in more, not look as jittery, a little bit more confident, things like that. And of course, I was talking to one of my guys the other day, and I was like, man, I couldn't imagine only getting 1 week of padded practice going from the college to the NFL level, and then you're preparing for a game, especially as an offensive lineman. I was like, I couldn't imagine. So I just think the expectations need to be pumped a bit, but we are seeing him settle in, and we were seeing him settle in. Of course, we saw that he did have some miscues in the preseason game. He gave up a sack. Wasn't really the best play by him. He got beat with his hands right away and then stopped his feet on top of it, and the defensive tackle got right around him and got to Trey Lance, and it just wasn't a great rep. He got beat on another one similarly like that as well. But we saw improvements in the run game. He seemed to have a little bit better feel and fit in the run game. It's just, I think in the pass game, he relied so heavily on his size and his hands. And what defenders are doing is they're taking away his hands right away. And I think you're seeing him struggle a little bit. So we'll temper expectations. Obviously, he goes down with a shoulder injury in that game, which is a big bummer because based on that assessment, he needs more reps. He needs more seasoning, things like that. So it was really tough to see him go down.
Yeah, and a shoulder injury for a lineman, how devastating is that? Because it seems like, that is probably one of the most important body parts for linemen, if not their legs. So can you talk about that and being sidelined, not only with an injury when you need more reps, but an injury like that where there's, the chance of re-agitating it once you do come back?
Yeah, it's really tough because the first thing you're doing as an offensive lineman is you're striking. You're bringing your head, you're bringing your hands. That you need them to create contact and kind of create separation between you and the defensive tackle. So if you're losing that leverage in your shoulder and it's bugging you and you can't really get a good punch and you can't control defenders with your hands and arms, which is what Aaron Banks did so well in college with, it will be a little bit of a disadvantage for him coming back to that. So the silver lining is it's only a 2 to 3 week timetable for the injury. So we'll see. He'll be back right there at the beginning of the season, but it's going to be interesting to see who steps into his place until then.
Right, and that was my next question because I think a lot of the expectation for fans was that he would be starting at right guard, and I'm hearing now that Brunskill is probably he has the edge for the starting role. So, how do you feel he's done in training camp?
Brunskill, that is.
Brunskill.
Yeah. So I was Brunskill's my guy. Had him on the page. We did an interview with him. I love Brunskill. We have a whole nickname and everything around him based on how he played against Aaron Donald. But even me, after watching Aaron Banks and drafting an offensive lineman in the second round, where Kyle Shanahan has only drafted 3 offensive linemen in the 3 years prior to that, and it was Mike McGlinchey, Justin School, and Colton McKivitz. Justin School and Colton McKivitz were 5th, 6th round picks. So they really hadn't invested in the offensive line. So when you saw them make that move to go and get Aaron Banks in the second round, I was like, oh, the writing's on the wall for Brunskill. Brunskill only signed his 1-year tender at about $800,000. Nothing guaranteed about that deal. Says you're the starter. So it really was up to Brunskill to prove his worth, win that job. And I think he did that in camp. You could clearly see Brunskill was far and away much further ahead than Aaron Banks. Brunskill is still doing his job, still able to win with technique. We're still seeing some of those things with Brunskill where he's not a power guy. He will get overpowered at times, but he's great with his technique, good foot speed, those kinds of things. And he does his job for the most part. So I've actually been pretty happy with Brunskill, and then transitioned that into the game on Saturday. Brunskill is actually probably one of the best, if not the best, offensive lineman that I watched on tape. I went back and watched it all. Of course, you had the sack that Brunskill gave up against Chris Jones. Got to give Chris Jones some credit. He's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL and is paid like it for a reason. But Chris Jones did a fantastic job exploding out of his stance. What he did with Brunskill is he grabbed Brunskill's hands. And so, again, we talked about striking earlier with Aaron Banks and the ability not being able to do that. Well, Chris Jones took away Brunskill's ability to strike. And when Brunskill went to plant and re-anchor so you could try and, re-divert the momentum of Chris Jones, he stepped on Sermon's foot and immediately went down and turned into an ugly sack. And, of course, the narrative came from it after that. But for the most part, I think Brunskill's done pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And what about the other rookie that they drafted for the offensive line, Jalen Moore? How's he been doing? What did you see out of him?
I was a little concerned to hear that Jalen Moore was starting at left tackle for that preseason game with
No
Jimmy,
pressure.
with Trey. No pressure, because in camp, like, we'll be honest, the rookies have looked like rookies on the offensive line. Like we've talked about, it's a really hard position to acclimate towards and get up to speed on that. So guys like Arden Key were giving them fits with speed to the outside and inside. So I was like, oh, here we go. But I will say, for the most part, Jalen Moore looked actually really good. He gave up a sack. He had his miscues. Again, that's the biggest thing with these rookie offensive linemen is they're going to look good on one play, and then on another play, it looks like they forgot how to play football. It's just that's the life of an offensive lineman. It's being as consistent as possible. So for the most part, though, Jalen Moore looked really good in that preseason game, and I actually came away pleasantly surprised with how he did at left tackle.
Awesome. Yeah. And we got our first comment here. Shout out to Nick Cork. And then before we go into running backs, Angie, are you drinking wine over there?
No, I knew you were going to say something because this was the only glass I had clean. So it's in like a beer glass, but it's Diet Pepsi.
Sure.
Okay. I was like, the first preseason game wasn't that bad.
No, not yet.
The injuries aren't that bad.
Talk to me like maybe after week 3, and it might be a different story. We'll see.
All right. We could get into the running backs now. So obviously, Mostert didn't play. We could assume go ahead.
Didn't we want to say who gave us a glimmer of hope?
Oh yeah.
Line, because Brad actually kind of led into who I was going to pick, and that was Moore, because he did kind of give me a glimmer of hope, because not only was he playing left tackle, which was a big ask for a rookie, in their first preseason game, first ever game. And, he didn't do that bad. And I think he's going to only get better from there. So that's who gave me a glimmer of hope. And the only reason I remembered we wanted to ask that was because he was raining such praise down upon him. So, but did you guys have anyone?
I didn't come prepared with one. But I was going to say Aaron Banks if I had to come up with one. And because I know, like, I've been hearing all of these reports out of camp that he had been struggling. I didn't think he did that bad on Saturday. So that gave me some glimmer of hope. But I'm glad we have Brad here to, tell us who gives him a glimmer of hope, because
that's the most accurate.
Yeah, he's a pro. And I feel like offensive line is one of those things that fans are kind of panicking about, at least when it comes to the second unit. So Brad, if you could give us like anything we can hold on to, who is a glimmer of hope?
So I'm really excited about Dakota Shepley. I think Dakota Shepley is the third string center. He's another guy, a friend of the page, and someone I've been just paying really close attention to. He's from the CFL. So he's still getting his seasoning. He's still catching his legs. But I think he was the 4th highest graded player on offense from that game. Yesterday, I went through all his reps. and he played really, really well. And one of the things that I'm literally checking right now is like who played right guard with that second team unit. I'm trying to figure out who's going to fit in because I think it's either him or Clemente. I think both of them actually really played solid, especially in tandem together at center and guard. McKivitz has his up and downs. McKivitz has his times where he looks serviceable and he looks good, and then there's other times where he just loses his balance. He got beat really bad on an inside move on that Trey Lance sack, where they brought 6. They only had 5 in to block. Trey Lance didn't really see his hot receiver in Wayne Gallman, but that didn't change the fact that Colton McKivitz got kind of beat right away with inside pressure really easily. So the inconsistencies is, I think, the biggest concern is we just need to close the gap with the miscues because they show at times they're more than capable of being serviceable. It's just reducing the mistakes and reducing the miscues that will translate into more serviceable play.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, and something we got. So for those of us who are joining us a bit late, yes, Trent Williams did leave practice with an injury. Something we'll continue to monitor because obviously we don't want Trent Williams going down at any point this season or even, before the season starts. So we'll keep an eye on that.
And Jalen Moore was actually the one to, again, replace Trent Williams with the first team offense today in practice.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, sounds like he's coming along, even if it's slow. I mean, we'll take it. Now on to the running back. So Mostert did not play. I mean, his role is pretty secure. He's probably RB1. We would consider Sermon the RB1B. And we saw Sermon play a bit, in my opinion, and I haven't watched the game over in its entirety, but Sermon, I think he averaged like 2.9 yards per carry, which isn't great. I would have liked to see a better performance, but I mean, it's just a first preseason game. I'm not ready to freak out. I've heard great reports from training camp on Sermon. What can you say about him?
I think a big part of that, too, with Trey Sermon is I watched the offensive line again pretty closely. When you have backup center Jake Brendel in there, who honestly has been a bit underwhelming all of training camp, you kind of saw some of that, too, translate into the game. He didn't make any plays where you're like, oh, no, massive miscues, but you could see he was on the wrong side of the body. He was on wrong leverage. He wasn't attacking his technique as he should, and in certain instances, and that just led to there's not a lot of lanes for Trey Sermon to run through, because if you go back and watch, he was really just kind of running and plowing into the back of his guys, trying to create as best he could, and just really couldn't get loose. So I think we all wanted to see more. Again, I've been one of the people who've been extremely impressed with Trey Sermon as a receiver out of the backfield throughout training camp. Again, it's really hard to judge running backs in training camp because they don't tackle. There's no contact. And we really understand what running backs are once you introduce contact. So I think, again, we'll get a better idea next week and the week after that. Want to get him a little bit more run. Again, would love to see him with Alex Mack at center, running in front of him, and Trent Williams. We'll see if that actually happens or not. But I think that also can contribute to why he might have looked a little bit lackluster on Saturday.
That's my least favorite part about training camp and preseason is because, like, they looked like this, but, they're not tackling. Or in the preseason game, you're like, well, he didn't do that great, but, they didn't have their best offensive lineman in the game. So it's hard to it's so hard to tell how players are going to be during the regular season until it's actually the regular season.
100%. 100%.
Right. Ooh, we got some love for Brad in the comments.
Shout out to
What's
Ryan.
Up, Ryan? Let's go.
But yeah, I mean, going back to the running backs, and we've talked about Elijah Mitchell. He's going to be out a couple weeks, but what did you see out of him in training camp? Because I was hearing good things. He's someone I'm really excited about. And so how is he looking?
He looked fantastic. Again, we'll see what happens when contact is introduced. He was a late scratch on Saturday, which was really interesting. Um, I anticipate he'll get some run on this next game against the Chargers, but in camp, he looked really good. He's just smooth. I like to call him Raheem Mostert's little brother because they have very similar skill set. That top end speed, both have top end speed, and they have that really good one cut burst ability where they find the lane, and then when they decide to hit it, it's one cut and go, and they're gone. Also, he's going to, I think, offer a ton in the passing game. He was unguardable by linebackers and safeties for the most part. They just couldn't deal with his speed on top of his cutting ability coming out of the backfield. And he showed good hands for the most part. So really excited to see what he can bring. Probably my favorite rep from Elijah Mitchell in training camp was a pass blocking rep. It was a 1v1 versus Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw comes in, tries to put a move on him, and Mitchell gets gets Greenlaw's shoulders turned and just completely planted Greenlaw on his back, like for pancake with a capital P. It was beautiful. I mean, to the point where Greenlaw was in his face. Offense, defense is like chirping at each other. It was just one of those ultimate football plays where you're just like, yeah, this is just down and dirty football that you love to see. So when you see a 6th-round rookie running back plant one of the better linebackers in the NFL on his back, something to get excited about.
Sounds like he embarrassed Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah, he did.
Well, that's Absolutely. Awesome to hear too, because I feel like pass protection is one of those things that for rookies, like that takes a little bit of time for them to get good at. So, I mean, I think that's awesome to hear that he's already, doing pretty well in that department. Another running back that I was expecting to see do a little bit better. Granted, it's again first preseason game, so there's still some time for him to, prove me wrong here. But Gallman, I really liked the signing of Wayne Gallman, and I think he would be a favorite for the 3rd running back position. Maybe now 4th, now that Elijah Mitchell is coming along, but I don't know. Hasty kind of gave him a run for his money a bit. So what can you say about that? Is that who has the edge there?
So I was actually on the same camp as you. I was excited about Gallman getting signed. Thought it was a super underrated signing with what he's done in this league, especially what he did with New York the year prior. And I thought he had a really good opportunity, and he looked good in camp too. He looked really good without pads. When the pads came on, though, you started to see more of some inconsistent play where he would have really good plays and then have some really bad ones. And of course, pads are the great equalizer. So, and now we got to saw him in contact situations where he still looked okay. You still see the ability's there. He's really good one cut running back. He's got more of the shiftiness to him than say like Elijah Mitchell. I think Elijah Mitchell's more smooth runner. Again, more one cut where like Gallman is going to hit you with a couple pump fakes before he decides where he's going to go. But I also thought he was going to be a great receiving back. But again, like I said, he's just been inconsistent. So based on him being inconsistent and JaMychal Hasty really turning on the heat on Saturday, I think before where it seemed like Gallman still kind of held that role, it'll actually be really interesting now to see if, because I don't think they're going to let Elijah Mitchell go. I don't think you can, because if you do, he's going to the Rams, he's going to the Seahawks, he's going to the Cardinals, and we don't want that. So I honestly think it might become between Gallman and Hasty. And with Hasty's performance on Saturday, which was really gritty and tough, and he had to do a ton of creating on his own, I think that might be a competition to monitor the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and do you have any concerns about Hasty? He fumbled, and I know there were some reports out of camp and even dating to last year that he has trouble holding on to the football. So do you feel like that's a legitimate concern and something that might maybe give Gallman the edge a bit?
So what I'm seeing from the fumbles from Hasty is he doesn't go down. He's really hard to go down, and the fumbles are occurring when he's got like three people around his waist and he's kind of being held up, but he's still turning his legs and someone comes in and punches the ball out. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because he's trying and the effort is there and it's really solid. It's just one of those misfortunes of, again, trying to gain as many yards as you can, and you have defenders coming at you while you're stopped to get the ball out. And so it's just one of those things where, okay, maybe you realize your momentum is stopped, hit the dirt. Don't stand up there and just wait for these guys to come plow you over. Just hit the dirt, get down, live to fight another down. So from the fumble, that's what I saw. I just saw a guy just trying really damn hard to get an extra yard, and he's fighting through all different kinds of people, and someone just came in and punched the ball out. So, of course, running backs, you gotta take care of the football. Absolutely have to take care of the football. But I at least like the context in which he is fumbling, which is he's trying for extra yards. Just maybe get down a little sooner.
Yeah, he's not just out there like running around with the ball like this.
Right.
For audio listeners, I was waving my arms around.
Going to the fullbacks now. Obviously, like we don't have any concerns over Kai Juszczyk. He's got the fullback position in the bag pretty much. But what have you seen from Hokett? Is he someone that you think is going to make it to the practice squad?
I hope he makes it to the practice squad. I hope he doesn't get poached. I am a little bit concerned about that because I've been pleasantly pleased with his performance in camp. I think he's an underrated wide receiver. The routes that he's running on linebackers and 1v1s and things like that, it's really nice. He's good athletic ability. Good as a blocker, puts himself in at least position. I don't think he's a dominant blocker, but he's a sound blocker, meaning he'll leverage block you, make sure he gets his head on the right shoulder, things like that, right technique. And again, he is a threat as a receiver out of the backfield. Trey Lance, even on the first pass, we could have seen a little bit more of Hokett. Hokett was wide open in the flat when Trey tried to hit Brandon Ayuk streaking across, I think, for his first pass of the game. I was like, are you going to dump it off to Hokett? He's right there, basically, like waving his arms around. But I think Hokett did also, too, in the game show more ability as a pass catcher and a blocker. I like him a lot. I would love to keep him around. I've been pretty adamant about he would probably be the starting fullback if we didn't have the best fullback in the NFL. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I hope he sticks around. I see the talent. I see the potential. Would like to keep him, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like fullback's one of those positions that just gets forgotten about, not even in fan circles, but even in the NFL. So hopefully that will be enough to, stash Hokett into the practice squad. That'd be great.
Right.
Moving on though to wide receivers. Again, we got guys that are like locked into their roles. Debo, Ayuk, we've been hearing great things about them in camp. I'm more curious about Sanu and Sherfield. Like we've been hearing great things about Sanu. And then Sherfield just seemed like someone who he came out of nowhere pretty much in terms of like, all these great reports coming out. And now it feels like they're kind of battling for that wide receiver 3 position. So can you tell us a little bit about that and, who's got the upper hand there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I think it was the last Thursday practice, so the last day of training camp, they were getting into more situational periods because they were preparing for a game. So typically when that happens, they're focused on clock management, putting themselves in situations that replicate the game. So we actually got to see the first team move down the field in a 2-minute period. And the wide receivers that were out there was solely Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, and Mohamed Sanu. I think Mohamed Sanu isn't even a question to make this roster. I think he's a lock. Whereas he was a question at the beginning of the year. But I think what he's been able to do is come in fantastic shape. He's being a great leader and mentor to the wide receivers in the room. Also Trey Lance and the quarterback. And he's performing well as a big slot, which Kyle Shanahan really likes to have in his offense. So I think it's really, from at least a slot perspective, it's both Mohamed Sanu and Trent Sherfield's job. That's a lock. I think Jawan Jennings is the one that's kind of nipping at the heels to decide if it's going to be Hurd or Jawan to be that third kind of big slot hybrid guy. But we'll see. So I like Sanu. I think Sanu's done a fantastic job. Again, I think he's a lock. Trent Sherfield is clearly a lock. Trent Sherfield is not going anywhere. Trent Sherfield has balled out. You talked about it. Seemingly just came out of nowhere. I anticipated him being a gunner and maybe returner, based on everything we knew of him coming out of Arizona. I think something that's interesting, though, is I think that's a lot of Wes Welker influence. When Wes Welker was with Arizona, you're seeing some wide receivers that he had experience with. Craycraft was one of them, come over from Arizona and be with us. And I think that's why Trent Sherfield got signed so quickly in free agency. He was right there at the top with one of the first people signed. And you're seeing the value that they're putting into him. Him and Trey Lance have a beautiful rapport. You saw it on Saturday. Of course, Trey Lance's first pass is a bomb to Trent Sherfield. You've seen that all camp. It's been nonstop. Trent to Trey, or Trey to Trent. It's been nonstop. So I expect more of that to continue. And then another thing to keep in mind, when Debo was held out of team period, it was Ayuk, Sanu, Trent Sherfield. So I feel pretty dang confident that it's those four are locked and loaded, ready to go.
Would love to see Trent to Trey, personally.
Yeah. Some of that 2019 Saints magic, maybe, where we had Emmanuel Sanders hit Mostert down the sideline. Oh my
God. Don't bring it up. I'll start crying. So you brought up River Craycraft. What's going to happen to him?
I imagine he's going to be cut and be a practice squad stash. He doesn't get reps. It's really hard, especially like guys like Nasimba Webster as well, who had a really solid game on Saturday with his end around and special teams play. He didn't get reps. Like, that's one of the fascinating things about being at training camp, is how little reps there are to go around, because you've got to get your first and second stringers acclimated, which means if you're not in that first or second group, you are scrapping and clawing to get on the field. And River did not get on the field until that last day of training camp, where we had a couple guys down. Austin Watkins didn't play. Debo didn't play. And he had some really good plays. He might have had arguably one of the best catches of camp, which was a 40-yard back shoulder against the sideline from Trey Lance. Beautiful, beautiful catch to go up and high point, adjust, turn his shoulders, get his feet in bounds. So you see the ability, but again, when we actually have kind of a pecking order in front of him, you know, Richie James is playing in front of him and guys like that. Jawan Jennings is playing in front of him. It's really hard to get on the field and really prove yourself. So what was intriguing is when he actually got the reps, that last practice of training camp, he did something with it. But again, I don't see a path, especially with how the other wide receivers are playing. Nasimba Webster's coming on real strong to be that kind of last special teamer / wide receiver. So it's going to be interesting. But if I had to project based on how Kyle has won about this, I don't know if River makes it.
Sad.
Yeah, Caseman.
But I mean,
Caseman D agrees.
It's a numbers game. It happened.
Yeah,
exactly.
He is a pod favorite for whatever reason.
Yeah, he just loved River. But
along.
like you said, he if he's on the practice squad, it ain't over till it's over.
Yeah, exactly.
49ers media here says Richie James also getting cut. I'm kind of on board with this. Like
right after Saturday
for sure. But a part of me feels also that like they might keep him around when he has the experience. He at this point, you consider him a veteran. Also, he has the kick return, punt return abilities. So there, we've been hearing that Ayuk might be taking over that role, and hopefully he does, because he's probably the best person for that. But I don't know. A part of me feels like Richie James might stick around just because he can do those things. We know. I don't know.
It's less of a risk.
What do you think? Yeah, it's less of a risk. What do you think, Brad?
It's been a crazy development to watch because I would say going into training camp, and I think most people would kind of fall in line with this just based on what we know and what we didn't know at the time, is Richie James has been here and he's done it when he's gotten opportunity. When he's actually gotten put into the game, he's scored touchdowns. He's put up big games and he's put up big plays from his time as a rookie, as a 7th round pick, all the way up until last year. He had games where he made plays. So I think that's kind of where we were headed going into camp. It's like, all right, it's probably going to be Richie James to get that third spot, right? Wrong. He's been jumped easily by Sanu and Sherfield. Almost when I showed up, they had already jumped him. And there had only been a handful of practices before I showed up. And so with what we saw, perfect example on that one play from Trey Lance to Richie James, it looked like kind of an out to the sideline. Trey Lance delivered that strike, just an absolute dart into a window about this big, only where Richie James could get it. That was one of those catches with the camp he's had that you have to make. You can't drop that. You don't. I said this yesterday. He's given up all the benefit of the doubt because he's had those drops all throughout camp, and he's not stepping up to the challenge for a guy who's been here, for a guy who's been in the system, has a rapport with Jimmy Garoppolo, all those kinds of things. You expect that person to take the step forward, but rather he's taking the step back. So I think that actually hurts him a lot more than some of these other wide receivers, because again, you expect that guy to take that step forward when the light is shining the brightest, and he is kind of shying away from the moment, which is tough to the point where if Nasimba Webster puts up another performance like he has, some of these other guys fighting for spots continue to perform. Craycraft. I mean, Watkins was pushing strong there for a couple days before he broke his foot. So he was pushing. Jawan Jennings is not letting up. Jawan Jennings has had way less practices than Richie James, but had far and away a better. Sorry about that. I don't know why.
Okay, I thought it was my Wi-Fi. I was like, and then Angie said, "Uh-oh," and I was like,
internal panic.
No, my StreamYard be playing me all the time. So it basically just comes down to when it comes to Richie James making the roster, I don't think he's safe. I don't think he's safe at all, because if I had to put myself in a coach's shoes, like Wes Welker, who's my goal is to get these guys to develop and take the next step forward. And in going into year 4, now's the time to take the step forward, especially when the opportunity's in front of you. And the fact that he's not, that to me is almost more of a hit on him. I would be like, come on, man. Like, it was all set up for you to go and get ready to go. And you're fumbling the bag right in front of me. If you're fumbling the bag right now, what are you going to do when we put you into the game? We saw that kind of translate to Saturday. Had that one opportunity he needed that catch. He needed it. And again, for coaching and player, that relationship, it's about trust. Can I trust you to go out and make me look good? There's a lot of ego going around there. Can I put you out there and feel good about it? I think it's to the point where they don't feel good about having Richie James out there.
I will say after that specific drop that you're talking about, like Twitter went off on Richie James, like
me included.
Yeah, Steph included. I try to limit my timeline abuse of players.
You have to. You have
but
to.
but yeah, like I saw people like really going in on him. I think it was a little bit, I think people were overreacting a little bit, but given, everything you just said, that people were really expecting him to kind of step up to the plate this year, and he's not. It's disappointing, especially if you've been a fan of the team for a long time.
Right. It's really tough. Again, we thought he was going to be the one to take that step forward. In fact, he's been the one to actually he's regressed the most out of, I'd say, all the wide receivers.
Damn.
Tough scene.
Yeah.
Tough scene.
Another player who we think may be on the roster bubble is Jalen Hurd. Ryan over here is wondering if there's any word on him practicing this week against the Chargers.
I haven't seen anything come through about him actually practicing, but I think he is absolutely on the roster bubble. Another guy in camp who he was getting some run, he was getting some opportunities, but wasn't getting targeted. He just wasn't getting an opportunity. They weren't looking his way. They weren't throwing the ball to him. Again, another guy that actually didn't get a couple catches until the last day of camp. We actually saw him get 2 consecutive caught passes in a row. But again, they were against kind of off coverage. It was over the middle. It wasn't a challenging situation. So it's been really, really difficult to actually analyze and evaluate him and his spot here. I will say when he caught his first pass, after kind of Kyle Shanahan and Wes Welker called him out a little bit for not being available, when he caught that ball and he turned upfield, he looked angry. He even had one of the DBs kind of like try to, they kind of swipe at the ball. He wasn't having it. He straight up just like, you could tell, like, when someone's like, don't touch me, I'm annoyed, don't touch me. Like that was his reaction. He's just like, get off me, don't touch me. He looked pissed, and he should be. He absolutely should be, because he's got to scrap and claw for a chance to get on this team, and he's going to, again, need a strong preseason. And if you're not playing, part of me kind of feels like they're getting ready for a cut and stash. Because, again, the guy hasn't been on the field for 2 years. Is anyone else going to take a chance on him to put him on an active roster? I don't know. So they might be trying to just, keep the narrative going and just stash them on the practice squad. You can elevate 2 guys from the practice squad each week. If you have a wide receiver go down, he could come up. Kind of feels like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll keep an eye on that, see if that's what happens. Moving on to tight ends. So one of the reasons that I did say that Richie James, my tweet regarding Richie James on Saturday was after seeing Jordan Matthews. And I'll tell you why, because I feel like Jordan Matthews deserves a spot on this roster based on some of the reports I've been hearing from him in training camp. And then just also on Saturday, I thought he played well. And we know that he could play wide receiver, if need be. So he can be that guy that is kind of your safety net, tight end 4, I think, at this point, and maybe, wide receiver, I don't know, 6 or 7, whatever. What do you think? Like, do you think there's a possibility that we see Jordan Matthews on the roster?
It's tough because he's performed pretty well. In camp. It's funny watching his transition because he was here last year. He's been here for, he's been here in and out. And you see him as a wide receiver and you're like, he's kind of a slow wide receiver, not really quick twitch, nothing crazy special this late into his career. But you move him tight end and you throw that tight end label on him. You're like, oh, he's a pretty athletic tight end. These linebackers and safeties are having a hard time covering him, which should be the case, right? He's used to going up against cornerbacks and nickel corners and things like that. You put a linebacker on him, he's eating, he's loving it. So I think from that regard, it creates a matchup issue, especially when if you're throwing out personnel groupings and the defense is keying on him as a tight end and they're matching that with linebacker and a safety, Kyle Shanahan's going to take advantage of that. So there is an opportunity. His blocking is, of course, going to be something that needs to be developed further. That might be the biggest thing that would end him up on the practice squad. I kind of see him being more of a practice squad guy for the same thing we talked about with Hurd. I'm not sure anyone else is going to stash Jordan Matthews on their final 53. So it'd be a great opportunity to have that guy on your practice squad, break glass in case of emergency. He could be a great receiving threat. Another big slot type of guy too. He could do all that kind of stuff. Again, it's just the blocking. I really liked the catch he had in the preseason game because he caught that thing and he threw that ball probably like 30 yards into his own sideline. You could tell how hyped he was.
Yeah.
And I love that type of body language from players because how much it means to them when they do stuff like that. So he's a great story. I hope he sticks around. I know he's worked his tail off this offseason. Don't know if he sticks in way of 53 man, but there's 16 spots on that practice squad. If you can get him on there and keep him there, I'd be all for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't really have to talk about Kittle. I mean, we know,
right.
His role is secure, although we did just see him ranked, 50th in the NFL's top 100, which made Angie feel some type of way, right?
I think it made all of us feel some type of way.
I love to use a good Donald Trump gif. There's one for every situation. And the one I used was like him making like a what the hell kind of face. So that was a little crazy. Because what was he ranked last time? I forget. Do you guys remember?
Yeah, he was up.
Like how
you don't go from 7 to 50 overnight because you missed a couple games. Like, let's be real.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't understand. That's why we just shouldn't even pay attention to that stupid list.
There you go. Yeah.
And then they put Trent Williams, I think, at like 42. I'm
42.
Like,
right.
What are we doing here?
Yeah. I mean, arguably 2 top 10, 15 players in the 40s and 50s. Like that's insane.
I think Trent Williams is the best. I've said it. I think he's the best player on this team for what he does at his position and the value that his position brings. I mean, he's going up against the best athletes on the face of this universe. Khalil Max, like all these types of just freak humans. And he's on an island and he's got to block him and stop him going backwards. Like that is a hard job. I think he deserves a lot more respect than 42. But at this point, I'm getting some pretender vibes, so I like it. Keep it coming. Keep discrediting us. The boys feed off of it, so I like it.
We saw what happened with the San Francisco Giants this year when everyone thought they were going to finish in last.
Right.
Look at them now. Right. Let's keep that energy rolling in the Bay.
Exactly.
I like it.
Exactly.
So some other tight ends, I've been hearing really good things about Dwelly like all throughout camp, and this might be the one year that they haven't brought in like competition at tight end too. So it feels like, this is Dwelly's job at this point, right? So what can you say about Dwelly and also Charlie Warner?
Stock up on Dwelly. I got a little bold. Stonks to the moon. I got a little bold on my show last night. I don't know if I'm going to backtrack it or not, but I'll repeat it. I was saying that I think Kittle and Dwelly are and could be the best tight end tandem in the NFL. I know there are some good tandems out there. I really do. But I hold Kittle in high regard. I hold him as the best tight end in the NFL because of what he can do as a blocker. I will go ahead and give Travis Kelce his flowers. He's probably the best receiving tight end for what he's done consistently in this league with Patrick Mahomes, the production, all of it. Okay, I can concede 1A Travis Kelce in the receiving game. But what Kittle does as a blocker, what he does as a leader, unmatched. Absolutely unmatched. I don't think there's anyone touching him. Kelce, like I said, might have the leg up as a receiver, but not even close as a blocker. And in our system, we need our tight ends to block. So huge. And with Ross Dwelly, wow. I made the comparison of like he was like a Pokemon, like how they have like the 3 levels of evolution. Mm-hmm. He was in that middle tier. Now he moved up to like the full Blastoise hologram. Like he's leveled up. His body looks different. He just looks like a different person. He still does. He lacks a little bit of that top end speed, but he knows how to win his way. And I don't care. I don't care how you win as long as you know how to win with what you have. You don't have to be a burner. Look at Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's one of the best route runners in this league, running a 4.7 140, and everyone called him slow and garbage. But as long as you know how to win your way, that's all that matters. And Ross Dwelley has proven that all throughout camp. And on top of that, when the ball hits his hands, he's catching it. He's not dropping passes. And he's been a great blocker. He's been a great utility piece. And so I love those two together. Of course, Ross Dwelley isn't going to get national recognition or any accolades or anything like that. But I really, really like those two together. And Charlie Warner, honestly, didn't play much in camp. Is another one of those guys that just didn't get a ton of opportunity. But I really like what he did in the preseason game on Saturday. He had that one nice catch where he got a big chunk yardage. And he had some nice blocks too. So another thing with Warner, I saw him from about 200 yards away. He had his shirt rolled all the way up, so I could literally see his six-pack from about 200 yards away. I thought it was Bosa. I was Jordan Elliott was sitting next to me. I was like, "Is that Bosa?" It's like we're on Bosa watch. Like, is Bosa practicing today? Is he not practicing today? I was like, "Is that Bosa?" He's like, "No, that's Warner." I was like, "Whoa." Like,
you're
Warner?
ripped. You're ripped when people think you're Nick Bosa.
Exactly. From 200 yards away, I was like, I can see a six-pack from here. It's like, who is that?
That's exciting.
Just got
smaller
seasoning.
Bear.
Right. Smaller. More seasoning for Warner, though.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear that Dwelley is now a holographic Blastoise, because we saw flashes of greatness from him last season. So we know that when he gets an opportunity, he makes the best of it. So to know that he's going to likely get more opportunities this season is exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we are getting a number of questions on the YouTube. Tanya asked, did they cut Webster? Heard on the presser today they did. They did cut Ken Webster, cornerback. Of course, we haven't been on our timelines for 50-ish minutes now, so if we miss something, Brad, you're our Adam Schefter
on Brad.
over here.
Yeah, that's on Brad.
I'm on the timeline. I gotta watch it all going. But yes, they did cut Ken Webster. Actually, someone I was perfectly fine with. They kept Alexander Myers, I think is how you say his name, number 41. Yeah. He didn't do anything insane, but he did a couple things where I'm like, I like your traits. I like the baseline athletic ability that he had, and a couple things that he did in practice. He was a late add to training camp. Didn't play a ton in the preseason, but they kept him over Ken Webster, who was on this team last year. Ken Webster is getting burnt though all practice. So interesting move to keep the Myers kid over the guy that you've had for some time now. But I just think it speaks more to how they value that Myers kid maybe. So something to see, but I don't think that's a loss that anyone's really gonna be too hurt over, other than of course Ken himself. Poor guy.
No one is safe at Richie
No one's
James.
safe.
Right. And like we mentioned, 2 more cuts to go before they get to 85. That is until next week when they got to cut it down even more. So there will be plenty more cuts to come. And we are getting a lot of questions about defense. Just a reminder, this is an offense episode. But of course, if we do have time and if Brad has time to stick around, we'll get to those questions at the end. But for now, the moment we've kind of all been waiting for, quarterbacks. I mean, come on now. Like, this has been the talk of the whole offseason for 49er fans, and we finally got to see both Jimmy and Lance in a game. So just tell us a little bit about, one, what you saw in training camp, and also how did that translate onto the field on Saturday?
I'll start at the very beginning. I'll start with my very first impression, watching them both live, that being Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. I showed up on the last day of non-padded practice, and so that was my baseline. What do these guys look like without pads? Honestly, it's pretty even. Both Trey and Jimmy had kind of an up and down day. They both made plays. They both made bad throws. They both had interceptions on the day. Kind of similar interceptions to basically throwing picks to underneath linebackers. So there is actually, I walked away. I'm like, I feel pretty even because leading up to that, they had that Saturday practice. Everyone lost their mind based on how Trey Lance had performed that day. And so I kind of was like, all right, well, apparently he's here. He's arrived. Everyone's super excited. Let's see it. And a Monday was just kind of like a ho-hum, like good plays, not so good plays. Like, yeah, it looked like a rookie. And Jimmy looked like Jimmy. But then the next day, first day of pads, Tuesday, night and day in regards to the type of offense Kyle was running for Trey versus what Jimmy was doing. All zone read. Trey was gashing the defense. They couldn't stop him. They literally couldn't stop him with his legs doing zone read. They even ran quarterback power when he got his first ever rep with the starting offensive line was a QB power, where Mike McGlinchey is pulling up the left side and his lead blocker for a designed quarterback run. We don't see that. We don't see that from Kyle Shanahan with Brian Hoyer, Jimmy Garoppolo, CJ Beathard, Nick Moulton. We don't see it. So that Tuesday and Wednesday, Trey Lance was by far the best quarterback on the field. It wasn't even close. That was that Tuesday practice. That was the day where Jimmy Garoppolo stayed after to throw deep balls by himself and run sprints by himself. And I texted a buddy of mine, and I was like, I think this is the day that we'll remember that Jimmy Garoppolo lost his job, because that Tuesday was so palpable in regards to the difference of the offense that was being run for Trey versus Jimmy. Jimmy, again, wasn't attempting deep passes. Everything was short to intermediate. And Trey Lance is running, throwing bombs, throwing back shoulders. I mean, everything you could think of. And you're like, all right, one guy's 21-year-old rookie in his 6th day of practice. The other guy's a 29-year-old veteran who's been here and done it, been to the Super Bowl. And it's like, it's just hard when you look at that from that context and you're watching it play out in front of you. And I like Jimmy. I've always been a Jimmy guy. I like Jimmy a lot. But when you're seeing it right in front of your face, and it's straight up comparison, and you're seeing offense look completely dynamic and completely different with another guy that's 21 years old, and then Jimmy comes in and it's the same thing that we've come to anticipate, it's like, we have something here. And so that Monday and that Tuesday and Wednesday practice, it was insane. It was insane how well Trey Lance had played and what Kyle was doing. Every practice since then, that offense went away. They still were doing zone read, but it was very minimalized from that point. And is actually the offense that Kyle was calling was geared towards Jimmy. And actually Jimmy was being successful, and he was making better throws, making better reads, being more consistent. He still struggled with the deep ball a bit. But in regards to intermediate throws, in breaking routes, he was on the money with it. And he was being really accurate at times as well. But again, it's fascinating. It's fascinating watching Kyle run practice one way for a quarterback, then put the clamps on him, and then do it another way, and seeing how each quarterback is elevated and dropped down just by Kyle pulling a string here and pulling a string there. So that kind of translated into Saturday's game is you didn't see any zone read. You didn't see Trey Lance do any type of tucking and running, which I think was asked of him. Don't run. Use your arm, stay behind the line of scrimmage, and try to win with your arm. So
is that because they don't want to show what he can do, or is that because, a lot of people are acting like they're not going to let him use his legs and that Shanahan is like stifling his talents?
I think one of my biggest takeaways after scouting Kyle Shanahan for 4 years is like he is absolutely a member of the tinfoil hat gang. Like he's probably the leader. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's saying. And he knows how it's being interpreted. He knows the narratives that are being generated off of it. He's a mastermind. I love Kyle. So I'm gonna send him a tinfoil hat one day. And we're gonna laugh about it because like I think that's what he's doing. He understands there's many moving parts outside of actually playing football going on right now, and I think you're seeing him execute his practice. That's why I feel like Tuesday and Wednesday, the first padded practice, he let it loose, and then he's like, okay, we know what we have, clamps on. Like we know exactly what we have. Yeah, clamps on. Like because like I said, Trey Lance was by far and away the better quarterback those 2 days of practice. And ever since he's kind of adjusted, Jimmy's been coming along as well. So
yeah,
it will continue to be a fascinating situation to monitor throughout.
Yeah, we're gonna have to start calling him Kanon.
Oh my God,
the leader of Kanon.
He fits in real good with our Twitter group, man. He fits in real good with our Twitter group.
From OnlyShans to Kanon, and here we are. We finally made it to the Great Awakening. Well, holy crap!
Well, a part of me wonders, like, is it not only for competitive advantage, which, obviously any coach wants to have, especially someone like Kyle Shanahan, but also could it be that he saw the chaos that ensued on Twitter after Lance had that amazing day at camp that he's like, we gotta pump the brakes on this because people are getting out of hand, and that's only going to start like this controversy even quicker than maybe he wants to. So I kind of wonder if that's also, I'm putting my tinfoil hat on and wondering if that's partly a reason as well.
I do think that is the partly of the reason, because one of the things that I've talked about, like, although I understand like there's clearly other things at hand going on behind the scenes and, agendas that they're trying to manipulate and do, I also understand what they're doing with Trey. I think we have to remember at the end of the day, Trey is freshly 21 years old, didn't play in 2020, and being drafted number 3 overall, having the entire world on your shoulders, it can be a ton. I personally can't imagine being in that position as a 21-year-old, being like having all those eyes on you. Like, you see what Twitter's like, they nitpick everything. I can't imagine being in that position, being a young kid and just getting ripped apart for things that are either warranted or non-warranted. So I think what Kyle has done has been fantastic for Trey, because I think Kyle understands that. He understands that if you put a ton of pressure on the kid, you anoint him the starter day one, people are already rooting for him to fail. Just, you see what happened with Zach Wilson right now, being the anointed number 1 in New York. People are at his neck already, again, not realizing this is a kid coming from BYU who's still very young and still getting his feet wet in the NFL. He's not going to be perfect right away. That's why we practice. That's why we preseason. And that's why we have multiple years of repping it and doing it to make sure we're good at it. But I think what Kyle has done, he's put the pressure on Jimmy, which he should. The 29-year-old veteran who's been in this league for some time. Put the pressure on Jimmy, put the pressure on Kyle. Kyle's put it on himself, because we're at the point where it's like we're looking at Kyle now. Like, all right, Kyle, we see it. Well, what are you doing, Kyle? Like, when are we going to see Trey behind the first team? When are we going to say first team O-line? When are we going to see him with all the first team unit? Like, blah, 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 because we haven't seen that in camp. And I think that's a big, big part of what he's doing is alleviating the expectation that comes along with fan bases and media and narratives, and just, again, putting it on Jimmy and putting it on himself.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about before. Is I've always said, what good is it going to do to come out and say that, back when they were saying we're doing cap or no cap on whether or not Trey was going to be the week 1 starter, or if there was a quarterback competition, like, why would it do the team any good to come out and say, yes, there's a quarterback competition. Like, all it's going to do is put more pressure on both the guys who we don't even know if he's sure who's going to be a starter yet. So why would he want to put that pressure on them like that?
And I forget, someone said it on Twitter, and I was like, oh, that was a great point. When you say it's a competition, that means someone has to lose the competition.
Exactly.
So to what you were saying, Angie, puts a lot of pressure on both parties rather than just putting the pressure on Jimmy, which
who can obviously,
yeah, and we know the backstory behind that. We know what's going on, and we know what happened all off season. Jimmy can clearly handle it. You have to give Jimmy his props and his credit for in putting ourselves in his shoes. Like, being talked about the way he was talked about the last 7-8 months, for him to come out, have the attitude he's had, props to Jimmy for doing that. And so again, but he's the vet, he's the pro, put the pressure on him and see what happens.
Yeah. And to see him, on the sideline cheering on Saturday night was pretty cool. Right. You get sometimes the prima donna of a quarterback who's going to sit and pout when the person that's there to replace them does well. So that was really cool to see. And it just showed, what type of person Jimmy G is, even given all of the hate that members of this fan base have thrown his way, myself included,
It happens. It happens.
It's part of being in the NFL, baby. Give Jimmy his roses.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, definitely. Almost like we saw with Alex Smith, right? Like, when Alex Smith was a quarterback in San Francisco, like, fans were ruthless, and you see how people react to him now. He got a standing ovation at the Giants game. Like, he is so loved now, and it's almost a shame that, fans didn't appreciate him when he was on the team. We have an opportunity to show appreciation to Jimmy Garoppolo now that he's still on the team. And again, like you mentioned, Ange, like, I also have been tough on Jimmy at many points. But I mean, let's bury that hatchet. Like, we know that Lance will eventually be the starter. There's no reason to have any resentment towards Jimmy Garoppolo at this point. So yeah, let's give him his flowers, as you say.
And Alex Smith, he did his job and made sure that Colin Kaepernick was ready to transition into a starter. He didn't sit and pout and cry that Colin Kaepernick took his spot. And Colin Kaepernick took his spot when Alex Smith was playing great. So
right.
He had even more reason to be mad,
Yep.
So,
and I'll never forget the "We Want David Carr" chants from Candlestick with Alex Smith. So I mean, the guy's been through it, and so it's just a testament of, like, storms don't always last, and you just gotta fight through, whether it's with this team or another team. There's Jimmy's still got plenty of years left, and we know it's not going to be with this team more than past this year. So Jimmy has an opportunity to go out and rebuild his legacy. But obviously what we're waiting for is we're just waiting for the Trey Lance era for it to begin.
Right. And another thing on Lance, like, I feel like Shanahan wants to put him through all these different tests and, like, the gauntlet, as I've been saying. He's been going behind the second unit offensive line, which we know is, like, not great, but, like, I think a part of that is he wants to see how Lance reacts, and I think he even admitted to that. So yeah, I think, he just wants to see how he does in these tough situations before putting him in easier situations, just to see how he does.
Yeah, he even said, I didn't want him to go perfect. I didn't want it to go perfect for him. Like,
exactly.
What?
Well, Kyle talks about that all the time. He talks about, how do you play from a clean pocket? Well, guess what? Majority of the time, you're not playing from a clean pocket. You're playing with people at your feet, all that kind of stuff. I remember, Steph, you posted that one bag drill that Kyle loves, right? We were talking about it. I think I commented on it. I bet Justin Fields does this perfectly. Well, Trey Lance does that bag drill perfectly too, and not a shocker. Like, he can just literally wide base, let it go, let it rip. So we'll see what happens. We'll see.
Yeah, and Justin Fields actually, after his game, which he played pretty well, he said the game was actually pretty slow for him. Those are the kind of comments like you don't want your rookie quarterback making. So Lance included, right? So
yeah, we'll keep that one to ourselves.
You wanted to be tough on him, right? So
right.
I don't know.
Well, and it was funny too because of course the narrative that came away from that was, well, Tua said that. Tua said that the game came slow to him, and look what happened to Tua after that. So
yeah, that's not.
You just bring unwanted pressure. It's about controlling narratives, messages. Don't put that out. You don't have to, even if it's true. You don't have to.
100%. Yes, Brad.
Exactly.
The tinfoil's
tinfoil
on
hat season.
Yes.
Well, just a couple more things before we get you out of here, because I know we're well over an hour at this point. There's been a lot to talk about. Just one last question on the quarterbacks before we get into Twitter Tizzy. Do you feel like the 49ers even need more than 2 quarterbacks if, they have such a strong backup?
If it's Jimmy and Trey, no, they don't need more than 2, in my opinion, which obviously opens up more situations for additional running back, an additional tight end, additional wide receiver. They've carried 7 in the past, wide receivers, that is. But they also did that with 3 quarterbacks. So we know how deep the running back room is. Jeff Wilson's going to be coming off PUP at the beginning of the year. So it will be interesting to see. Again, I think there's a lot of posturing going on because they need to understand who will be on this roster and who will be available, because it's no secret. I think Kyle Shanahan has been trying, or at least in the offseason was trying to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he still doing that? We don't know. I don't have concrete information that would say he is or he isn't, but I do know that Jimmy's contract isn't fully guaranteed for the most part until week 1. So that technically there's a quote unquote timeline still up in the air where there's about 2 weeks where Jimmy could get moved and the 49ers clear a ton of cap space. And then if you do that, Sudfeld, I think, has been you've seen Jason and Jordan and all of us on the timeline. Wake up, honey. Sudfeld dart. Like,
hell yeah. 209 native Modesto Christian.
100%. He's been far and away the better quarterback over Josh Rosen. That's why I was like, why is Josh Rosen getting all this run? But again, tinfoil hat. He knows Sudfeld's a baller and a player, and maybe just keeping it close to the vest. So we'll see.
That would be insane. Like, don't even put that out there on the timeline because don't remind people about that window because they'll just run with it.
No, we just
oh my god. Were you making that?
No, I have this from draft season. This is the original.
Someone take a screenshot of this, please.
I have my logo on it. I
don't know how to do it on my computer. Hold on.
This thing's been through hell and back. It's been through hell and back for sure.
I think I did it. I think I took a screenshot. Okay.
Oh my god.
Beautiful. So do we want to hop into the Twitter Tizzy real quick?
Let's get into it.
I think it's a perfect question to end on. I did a poll on Twitter and I asked, who do you see starting week 1 for the 49ers? And obviously the 2 options were Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. It received 242 votes. So like 0.5% of 49er fans responded to this poll. But it was 67% believe that Jimmy Garoppolo will be the starter week 1 and 33% believe the starter will be Trey Lance. I wanted to read a couple responses that I got to the poll. Let's see. Buck for it, at Buck for it, he said, week 1, 0 doubt it's Jimmy. Week 4, probably Jimmy. Week 6, could be Jimmy. Week 8, not Jimmy. Week 10, who Jimmy? So that's kind of the vibe that I was getting from a lot of people.
Oh my god, great response.
Yeah, that's like the vibe. That's the vibe I was getting from a lot of people that responded to my poll. Was that that 67% they want to see Jimmy first. They want to see if he can do it, and in their opinion, if he can do it, there's no reason to rush Trey Lance to start. I'm kind of in the boat of I think Trey Lance needs more reps to be prepared to be a starter at some point. But I also understand the win now mentality, and based on Saturday and some of the things that we saw, some things that could be improved on from Trey. Like right now, Jimmy is a safe bet in a lot of people's eyes, I think. So what do you guys think about it?
I'll go first, I guess. I would say that as long as Jimmy Garoppolo is on this roster, I think he's going to start week 1 if he's here. Again, we just talked about the 2-week hypothetical that could be out there. We don't know anything or if that would actually occur or not. But if Jimmy Garoppolo is on this roster, you're not paying a guy all that money to, and not give him, again, the benefit of the doubt to go out there and show what he's capable of. If you're keeping him and Kyle Shanahan is true to his word that Jimmy is the starter and he hasn't been giving us lip service and it's truly how he feels, then okay, yeah, then you got to go do it. Go put him out there. If it's a situation where it's really 50-50 and he doesn't know which way he wants to go, if it's 50-50, you have to go with the rookie, in my opinion. And that's kind of what I was talking about with camp a little bit earlier. It's like, again, you're looking at a guy who's 21 years old. He's only going to get better. He's only going to mature. He's only going to grow into his body even more. He's going to grow into his mind more. And he needs experience, like Angie talked about. So what are we doing? What are we doing at this point? I've been a big proponent. I think Trey Lance was arguably the most pro-ready quarterback of this draft class based on the scheme he ran at North Dakota State. We're 100% seeing that thought process translate because he's taken on and completely mastered the offense already. On top of his offense, he has his own individual offense compared to what Jimmy has. He's mastered both of them. So if it was up to me and I didn't have to worry about narratives, I didn't have to worry about people's feelings or anything like that, it's easily Trey Lance for me because I think he gives us a better chance to win. I know there's the big narrative that no rookie has ever taken taken a team to the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl. And I just look at what Kyle Shanahan did with Jimmy Garoppolo coming off a torn ACL, playing in his first ever full season, leading them to the Super Bowl and a quarter away. I don't see why he couldn't run that same system with Trey Lance, because if you look at it, he relied heavily on the defense, relied heavily on special teams, relied heavily on running the ball, predicated passing off play action, which, again, he schemes guys open. Kyle does, that is. And we only saw 4 opportunities where Jimmy had to do it, right? It was Pittsburgh, it was the Saints, Rams, there's another one in there where he had the come from behind victories, or we really needed Jimmy to pull it out. Other than that, you could you could literally take a rookie, and I look at Jimmy in 2019 as a rookie because the ACL hindered him mentally, and 2, he already didn't have the experience of playing the full season. So I looked at Jimmy as a rookie. So, and knowing what I've seen from Trey Lance in practice, again, with the defense that we should have if healthy and everyone's out there, with the O-line, with these weapons, I think Trey Lance gives us the best chance to win.
I will say, with the lack of playing time that Trey Lance has compared to, Jimmy Garoppolo had started a lot of games in the NFL before the 2019 season, obviously. So I don't know if I would compare them as the same rookie type situation, but I see where you're going with that.
Definitely not the same.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other things too with that scenario is that I had it and I lost it.
That's okay. You think about it and Steph will give her answer.
Thank you.
Oh, am I answering?
Your answer. Yeah. Everyone gets put on the hot seat.
So, okay. Yeah, I think Garoppolo will start week 1. Who do I want to start week 1 though? Is Lance. I mean, for the same reasons that Brad said, I think he can run the same offense that Jimmy has been running, and with even more upside, if we're being honest. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, he has so many more weapons just with his body alone, you know, that he has at his disposal, not even counting the arm strength or anything like that. So it's running that same offense with this, and this upside.
And we saw what he could do. I think there were a few starters. I think he had McGlinchey and who else did he have on Saturday when he made that
Brunskill and Lankin.
So he had a couple starters. We saw what he can do even with just those guys in there, right? And obviously we see a difference, you know, that it was once they were out, but you know, you got to look at just. A lot of people were saying, oh, Jimmy would have gone to Ayuk, who had also an easy first down, right? And that wouldn't have been a wrong play to make. But again, we see the upside. We see, you know, the difference between a first down and a touchdown. I think that's what Lance gives you. So, yeah, I my pick would be Trey Lance, but I totally get why, you know, they want to see what Jimmy can do and give their rookie a little bit more time. So I respect that. Yeah.
And then I think the point came back to me of what I was going to say was you take away the drama, you take away the offseason, you look at it in a vacuum of football evaluation, and that's it. You take away all the red tape. Jimmy Garoppolo is still making mistakes. He's still struggling with accuracy on the deep ball. He's still throwing those Jimmy throws.
With the first team.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you're getting that out of Jimmy and Trey, but Trey has a higher ceiling, has more potential, is the future of the franchise, and all of those things, and you're seeing Jimmy Garoppolo not play his perfect game, at a certain point, you have to make the decision for your locker room. Because, again, these guys, they know what competition is. They know who's playing better than the other guy. They absolutely do. That there's a reason why Ayuk and Debo have had really poor body language on missed passes from Jimmy Garoppolo. They understand what is going on. So if you're going to go out there and put Jimmy Garoppolo in, he better be like in for a reason, because he's performed better. Because if you don't, and Trey has actually been performing better, but you still put Jimmy in, you have an opportunity to completely split the locker room, which is what I don't want. And I'm really concerned about. So again, with what I've seen both guys be up and down, but the ceiling is exponentially higher than what Jimmy can do. And that's the difference.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds like a perfect place to end the show.
Exactly. You nailed it. And again, Brad, you've been awesome. Like, I wish I could just hear you talk even longer, but
I know we could stay on here for 2 hours.
We've held you hostage for far too long. But thank you for being on so much, and thanks to all the listeners who sent their questions and comments and all that. Yeah, it'll be up on streaming platforms tomorrow. If you guys missed our defense episode with Jordan, he was awesome as well. Make sure you check that out. That's up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else where they have podcasts. So
all right. I appreciate you guys having me, man. This was a ton of fun. We definitely got to do this again soon. This is cool.
100%.
For sure. All right. Thanks everyone for listening, and peace.
Bye, Brad. Bye, everyone.
All right, guys.